Hey, Buru, Iboya, Ibuche, everybody in Cyberland. All right, let me get myself situated here. Let's get myself situated here. Still got about another minute before we kick this off. But let's see. Make sure I got everything going. Let me make sure that I have everything here. Let's make sure. I'm actually gonna try to do this also. Also gonna do this on TikTok. So hopefully you guys can hear me fine. And we're gonna get after it. We are going to get after it for sure. Let's see. Buro boy, Alex, what's going on? Alex, how you doing, my friend? All right, let's see. Let's see how this works. Let's see how this works. Let's see how this is gonna work. Let's see how this is gonna work. Hopefully everybody's doing good. Janae, how you doing? Iburo boya. Hold on, I'm trying to see if I can add somehow. How can I go show at least one camera before you go live? Live, yeah? You're already showing the camera. What are you talking about? Man, let's see what's going on here. Let's see what's going on here. Hey, Buddha boy Abucheche, happy new day. Mino, how you doing? Hopefully you're doing well. All right, hey guys, I was gonna try to do this on two different screens, and because I have the, I guess I had the, what do you call it, the TikTok, right? So I apologize to keep you guys waiting. Just trying to make sure trying to see if I can spread the good word as well, somewhere else, but it's looking like I'm not gonna be able to do it. So maybe I'll just have to, just gotta do it out. Just gotta do it out. It is what it is, you know? It is what it is. Let me ask you guys a question. If I started to do these on TikTok, nah, I'm not, probably not. Never mind. I'm not even gonna ask you guys. Probably just gonna let this be for now. We'll just kind of figure it out as we go. Let me see. I'll be able to kind of see if later on I can figure out how to do it and go live on TikTok and go live on um, you know, on YouTube Live because I don't want to abandon YouTube. You know what I mean? YouTube's been good to me. YouTube is where I have a lot of the followers, and I think that's important. So, well, at least it was worth a try. I don't know about you guys, but it was definitely worth a try. Um, boom. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens here. Oh, maybe it'll come out like this. Hey, Buru, Iboya, Ibuche, everybody in Cyberland. He's a fair Babaláwo, at least I hope so. Omodun, Oddi, Leke, coming at you from both TikTok and YouTube Live. So, unfortunately, there's no camera for the TikTok world, but hey, you know what? It is what it is. It is what it is. And we're gonna go ahead and just jump right in. Hey, so everybody who tuned in on the last go for the spiritual Sundays, right? We spoke a lot about the orishas, and we were trying to compliment. Hey, what are the orishas, right? And then we started to kind of talk about some orishas, and we left off with Ogun, right? So just to kind of paraphrase some things that we were talking about, when I say we were talking about the orishas, I want to say, hey, we started to talk about Ori. We started to talk about God. We started to talk about, hey, the foundation. We went everything from Olodumare, right? We went from Olodumare, we went down to the Irumoles, and we went down to Irumole Orungs, and we started to talk about the orishas. And we started talking about orishas that were ascending. We started talking about, different concepts when it was all said and done, right? That kind of leads us to where we are today. And this is where we are at. And this is a beautiful thing. So I appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in on this beautiful Sunday. That's the way to do it. So I appreciate each and every one of you. If you had not had a chance to look at the other, spiritual Sundays, they're on YouTube Live. That's great. So this one is particularly going to be for each and every one of you that are on here today. And again, I'm blasting this out to TikTok world. I'm blasting this out to YouTube Live. So let's see where this goes. Hey, I'm Alan. Alan, how you doing? You doing good? Buro boy bucheche. More about that live. What's going on? How you doing? Okay, let's jump right in. So we left off with Ogun, right? Because we were talking about Chango. We finished off Chango. No, we finished off Ochung as well. And we talked a little bit about Obatala. So now I want to talk about Ogun, right? I want to talk about how Ogun kind of correlates when we start to kind of see, how does Ogun reflect to us in our lives when we start to kind of talk about the Yoruba cosmology of things. So hopefully you guys are ready for this fun-filled one. So when we talk about Ogun, we talk about a lot of, the aspects of Ogun and when we talk about the transparency, right, of Ogun, right? And what Ogun offers, a lot of times we want to think about iron, we want to think about metal, we want to think about steel, and we want to think about forging, right? But more importantly, when we talk about that, we talk a lot about where does Ogun take us from here, right? So when we talk about this Orisha of iron, of war, of industry, right? If Obatala was the artist of molding clay, and let's say Ochun was the dancer, right? Flowing with her beautiful rivers of life, right? Then we begin to kind of see that Ogun becomes this tireless worker, right? That's always swinging his hammer and always building something. And that's a beautiful thing to kind of always understand. Ochungo Lodi, how you doing it, bro boy? So then when we start to envision Ogun in this sector, we start to kind of say that he is often envisioned, right, as a strong, blacksmith. We start to kind of see, with Ogun's machete, he's clearing the paths. He's also, also very much deep and ingrained into the wilderness, right? And no different than how he's ingrained into our lives, because our lives at the end of the day is this marketplace. Our lives at the end of the day can be considered the wilderness, and we got to kind of look at it from those perspectives so we can better apply it. So when we look at Ogun, we understand that he's envisioned strong, muscular, clearing the way. Ogun's domain is all things metal. We get that, right? From a traditional, farming perspective, war perspective, right? Because a lot of times, what do we talk about Ogun? Ah, Ogun's a warrior. Ah, Ogun, cut somebody's head off. Ah, I got a problem with somebody. Let me go to Ogun, all right? So no, but hay bendiciones. You say I got an echo. Okay, let me see if I can kill this echo a little bit. Tell me if this sounds better. Tell me if this sounds better. All right. Everybody hears me okay, loud and clear. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that helps. But hey, glad to hear everybody. Ah, the same. I don't like the same. Everybody on YouTube Live, you guys hear me okay? Everybody hear me all right? Let's see. Let me see if I can fix. And let me see if I can fix this just slightly a little bit. Let me see if I can fix this just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, it's echoing. I'm sorry if it's echoing, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We can hear you. It's just an echo. Yeah, hopefully I can see how this works, because I'm trying to submerge both YouTube Live and TikTok at the same time, and that might be was drawing up the echo. So let me see if I can maybe just push this away a little bit. Maybe that helps. If not, again, I apologize. Hopefully you guys can still hear the message. Hey, the big thing when we talk about, Ogun, Ogun is very much, revolutionary when it comes to our lives, right? Ogun is more than just a war-bound Orisha. Ogun is the artist, right? This is the reason why I mentioned if Obatala was the one that formed, right, the clay, then what was the tools that Obatala used? If the farmer is putting the seeds down, right, at the end of the day, then then what was that tool that the farmer was using, right? And that particularly should begin to start to kind of resonate with us. Oh, there's a lot more to Ogun, right? If in the surgery, at the end of the day, when you're doing surgery, and the surgeon has the scalpel, that's Ogun that's presenting himself. The engineer building a building, a car, it doesn't matter. The struggle or the battle that requires, the tenacity, that's Ogun. Obviously we know Ogun, but we don't necessarily see enough of Ogun and the cosmic power of Ogun in our everyday lives. And we have to start to kind of change that perception a little bit so that we can better understand. So that is very important. Ah, son of success, man. Appreciate you wanting to join. No, absolutely. Hey, I'll do a separate session after on TikTok, and I'll definitely invite you. Send me follow me, and then I'll follow you back, and we'll get after it. So then, when we start to kind of better understand Ogun, right? We understand his colors. We understand the green, the black, the offerings. We understand the pommel, the rum, the piece of iron, right? But we praise Ogun. Lakaye olorun, abe onya, orun, Ogun, the one who clears the road. And a lot of times, traditionally, when we talk about Ogun, we have to always remember that Ogun, he finds his way. Without Ogun's machete that's carving through a lot of the primordial chaos that is in this world, right? The world as we know it today, will not be accessible. It was Ogun that allowed us to push through. And that was something that we needed to always kind of remember as we progress, right? And this is both, literally, mythically, figuratively. Sure, this is the truth, and it's a powerful metaphor. Progress, right? And this is what I want you guys to take into 2026. Okay, progress often requires grunt work, right? Progress needs that you don't just do brujeria, you don't just do spirituality, but no, how do you complement that, right? With Ifainu, right? With the taboos that you live with your ita. How do you begin to push that forward so you can better understand, right? So then if progress is often requires grunt work and clearing the obstacles, which is exactly Ogun's specialty, right? And we have to align ourselves with that because that is the everyday life that we live. We have to grind in order to get to where we need to. So we always honor Ogun, right? Because we all resonate with that power of Ogun. When we feel stuck, when we feel blocked spiritually, you call on Ogun to cut through those impasses, through those obstacles, right? This is the reason why, Ogun is a pioneer. People who like to travel a lot, right? People who have different professions that deal with a lot of metal or have to work with metal, that's something that we just have to understand. But more importantly, right, we have to always remember those who venture first into the unknown, machete in hand, like Ogun, making their way, this is where this is going to be done. This is who's going to bring you that power and that elevation and that alignment. Ogun. Right? Ogun's personality in a lot of the patakis is rugged. It's very straightforward. Right? Ogun values truth and honor, just like Chango. In fact, they are pretty close, in relations and entails, and sometimes even seen as brothers, right? But Ogun is less about judging morality and more about enforcing law and order, unlike Chango, right? So, we see these relations, right? But we understand that Ogun has a set rule, and this is very important for the children of Ogun. The Omo Oguns in the world need to always remember that, Ogun doesn't like laziness. Ogun doesn't like cheating. Ogun is a very serious Orisha that when you approach him, we got to understand how we're approaching him and how we're going and how we're moving. We see in many of the Patakis with Ogun that, there at one point or another, there's a lot of relations, right? Of what happens when we learn to disrespect Ogun. When we don't necessarily align ourselves properly and understand the power of Ogun, we begin to ignite something that we don't truly understand. The message here is to understand what are we trying to ignite. If you're trying to ignite or you're trying to bring forward, right, an Orisha, right, that has the elements and the attributes and the characteristics of what I just mentioned, right, then you need to understand what that brings. You got to avoid, running into Ogun without truly understanding how you're going to move forward, right? So, Ogun created a new path, right? And we start seeing this when we talk about in relations to Babaláwo. There's Patakis where Ogun created a new path for Babaláwo, right? And cut through the forest so that could be understood and he could be and find his way. And thinking about it, you know what I mean? That man, that Babaláwo, right, took this unfamiliar path, and once he did, he was able to find success. He was able to find himself to Chango, where Chango then gave him a kingdom so that he can rule. There's a lot of different patakis, and I merely just mentioned this one because you start to kind of see where all the orishas work hand in hand with each other. But Ogun, being one of these primordial orishas that's always been there, has been really good at the end of the day of always clearing the path for those who need it. The energies and the characteristics of the orishas that need it. And that's something that we always got to remember. So Ogun, at the end of the day, we begin to kind of see, he's a man that's humble, grateful, acknowledged. You know what I mean? From today, I see that, you got to consider Ogun. You always got to count on him, right? And a lot of times in the moral of today's world, we ignore Ogun, you know what I mean, at our own peril. We understand that we have to respect them. We got to respect the tools and the processes that keep our lives going. You know, there was a time where a man thought he can kind of pull a fast one on Ogun, right? And Ogun's importance. Maybe thinking spiritual fate, the other Orishas will take care of me, right? And we begin to learn in certain patakis that when people do those things begin to fail. Right? You begin to depend when it comes to Ogun on surgeries. You begin to depend on that automobile that you drive. You depend on that airplane that you jump on. You depend on that house that's foundationally sounded by probably a lot of metal. Right? You have to understand Ogun. Again, a lot of passionate ideas, right? And we have to understand that strategy and that labor. So I don't mean to kind of continue talking about Ogun, but I need you all to kind of really reflect hard on Ogun, the perseverance, right? War, conflict, technology, elevation, or and innovation at that, right? Perseverance is the key to Ogun's traits. For all the children of Ogun out there, you have to understand this. I see more cases of children of Ogun who prefer to do nothing than something, and then they wonder why things don't necessarily work out because they're going in conflict with the very Orisha Batori that they have. So, for this spiritual Sunday, I tell you this: learn who Ogun is, not just what I just told you, but do some homework so that you can better align yourself. Ask questions to the elders so that they can better help you. In real world issues, Ogun is clearly linked to war and conflict. What do we got going on around the world? We got battles, we got conflicts, we got wars, right? But we also have technology and innovation. Think about it. Just think about it for a moment, right? Ogun is involved in everything. And hopefully we understand that. Ogun, yeah. Ogun, give me life and energy. Ogun, yeah. All right, so now let's consider this justice and discipline thing. If Chango is the judge, let's think about it like this. If Chango is the judge, bro boy, good to see you on here, Kish. If Ogun is I'm sorry, Chango is the judge, then Ogun is like the police, the executioner combined, right? He enforces the divine justice in many of the patakis. It's said that Ogun carries out the punishment on earth, right? When God determines that it is so. This is the reason why a lot of times, and I want you to take this and write this down if you can. Olofing and the raft of Olofing is Chango on one side and Ogun on the other. Chango's the judge, and Ogun is the executioner. This is the reason why in Lukumi we talk about this concept. That's very important. Right? For instance, right, in some accounts, of the Great Flood, a lot of different religions and spirituality talk about this Great Flood, right? It was Ogun who dug the channel to carry Ochun's floodwaters, right? And who struck down the wicked and the immoral and the illegal, right? That was Ogun. Ogun doesn't decide right or wrong on his own, right? He acts on the moral directives given by certain figures. Ogun has always been very respectful and close to Orumila, close to Obatala, a raft of Olofin. Ogun always reminds us of those principles that we always have to look at, which is why we have to channel our strength towards our righteous ends. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Right? Ogun in us is the capacity for anger and aggression, right? Which can be destructive if it's misused. So we have to be careful on how we portray the attributes and characteristics of Ogun. So then I go back and I say, well, if you're a child of Ogun, you have to be careful because those attributes live a lot closer to you than others. But under guidance, that same force, guess what it becomes? Anger and aggression flips to courage and protection. So consider our personal relationships in your life, right? Right now, our personal relationships, anger itself, it isn't evil, it isn't bad. It's just like fire, right? It can cook or it could burn the house down. Think about it, right? Ogun, if there's one thing that I really want to say is Ogun is a lot more mystical. Ogun has a lot more going for him. Ogun, at the end of the day, you cannot dismiss. You have to understand Ogun. You got to be one with Ogun, right? The disciplined warriors know when to draw a sword and when to keep it in the sheath, right? Ogun also relates to a lot of the honesty and the straightforwardness, which I admire for Ogun, but a lot of people don't know how to take that. In today's age, in today's world, right? Um, I like to think of it like this. Ogun, well, I'll give it to you in another scenario. We're very careful in how we speak to people, right? Ogun doesn't necessarily carry a lot of sympathy when they try to explain something to you, right? They just tell you how it is. They're not really worried about your feelings. That's Ogun because Ogun is just honest and it's straightforward, right? There's no diplomacy, there's no sugarcoating. You know what I mean? A lot of other Orishas have those attributes. But Ogun is going to tell you something, he's going to tell you something. Says it like it is. A lot of times I like to use the phrase, if the baby's ugly, it's ugly. Call it ugly. It's okay. Right? This candor, can be a virtue, but it can also be very, I guess, hurtful to a certain point for those who are not ready to take in the truth. And nowadays, I think we find ourselves being a little bit more, or try to be a little bit more, I guess, accommodating, right, to others. And sometimes we just got to hear it, right? Because if you don't hear it, guess what? You're going to feel it. Because the Orishas and the energy and everything is not going to align where it needs to be, and things are just not going to work themselves out. This candor can be a virtue if you allow it to be. In the world of political correctness and all these hidden agendas, right? And all these social media, influencers, and everybody wants to kind of be the best of the best, and whatever that may be. And I told many people before, this is not about popularity. This is about education. And this is about, the challenges to use truth as a sword to cut through lies, not as a knife to wound the innocent hearts. And I worry about that in today's age, right? And I appreciate you bringing that up there when we talk about AI. So, Keish put in here, I think about AI and how it's tied to that. No, absolutely. Because here's the thing with AI and the AI evolution. Sure, it can scourge, the internet, and sure, it'll give you something nice and pretty to look at. And sure, I think evolution's important and technology is important. Why should you not use it? But I always tell people, and this is not to be, you know, speak poorly, but shit in, shit out, right? That's the big key. If you put shit into a system and you want good information out, it doesn't work that way. So are we trusting that the AI is, scourging the internet, is getting all these data pieces together and is pumping out information to you? But what do you know what's real? What do you know what's false? Are you going to find yourself in a predicament thinking you truly understand when you're truly being pushed away? Because guess what AI does? And a lot of these large language models, right? They hallucinate and they're gonna try to appease you. They're not gonna give you the good, the bad, the ugly. That's what Ogun gives you. It gives you the good, the bad, and the ugly. AI doesn't do that. But I do like the fact that AI at the end of the day is an evolution. The microchips and everything else, those are all Ogun. That's where Ogun is starting to truly, push his essence because we have to evolve. When we think about Ogun, we think about things like, the farm and the workshops. We talk about the ability to provide for our families through labor. You know what I mean? Someone goes to work, they come home, they're constantly jobbing. All these things are beautiful things, right? To build infrastructures like roads and houses, all the things Ogun blesses us with, we always got to give thanks in our community, right? And we always got to understand, we got to roll up our sleeves. We got to go for it relentlessly. At the end of the day, that's just the way it is. Ogun embodies that mindset. This is a wider world. We see Ogun as issues of security and conflict, from a personal self-defense of maybe national military matters, things that are going on in Ukraine or Israel or Syria or wherever, and our own U.S. of A. Right? There's shootings everywhere. War is a terrible reality, but Ogun's presence among the other Orishas remind us that this is a shared dimension to the warrior role. Protecting the community and upholding justice is also a thing. The concept of a just warrior, like the Orisha Ogun, right? We always got to remember. So a lot of times I think when, and I want to end Ogun and I want to jump into Yemaya for a little bit, but here's something I leave you all with. you know, and I appreciate that Keith used truth as a sword to cut through lies. Absolutely. Here's something I leave you with. We pray to Obatala for peace, right? We also prepare for the challenges with Ogun. You know, as the old saying goes, trust in God to keep, you know, to keep us safe. And God entrusted the Irumoles and the Orishas to do this for us, right? In Yoruba, one always says, we got to pray to Obatala for peace, but sharpen Ogun's machete just in case. This is not to glorify violence or nothing, but it's to acknowledge that the strength, must back up the goodness, right? In a fallen world. Right now, each and every one of your communities are being plagued by something, right? And we always got to remember peace, yes. But if we have to go into the defense or the offensive side of things, then it is what it is. So before we leave in Ogun, okay, I will tell you this, and I appreciate each and every one of you jumping in because I'm gonna jump on Yemaya for a little bit now, right? Ogun inspires us to never give up. Die on the battlefield of life's challenges rather than live as a coward shrinking from them. Think about that for a second. We have to give it in. We got to push forward. And may Ogun's iron fortify your spirit. Doesn't matter what battle you face, internally, externally. Call the Orisha of iron. He got your back. Feel that unbreakable chain to support from the ancestors who worked, who fought, blood, sweat, and tears to give us where we are today. May Ogun sweep away all obstacles in your life. Okay? Iburu boy Abucheche. Now we're gonna jump into Yemaya. We're gonna jump into Yemaya. But I want to make sure that we're clear. We understand where Ogun sits in our lives. We understand that Ogun is a lot more complicated than just somebody who wields a machete and kills people and goes to war and all those things. We don't look at the beautiful side, this the surgeon's scalpel and the artist's pick and the paintbrush and all these engineering work. Oh my God, what a beautiful thing. Ay, Burubo Ebucheche, right? Alaravache to Ogun. Ogun Boyeo. May Ogun sweep away all the obstacles before you. Okay, boom. All right, I don't got no questions. I don't see any questions. I don't think I missed anything. Let's go and get after it. All right, Yemaya. What do we know about Yemaya? So here's something that's very interesting about Yemaya that I want to make sure I cover so I can complete the series. Again, guys, last week we were going over the Orishas and we ran out of time. We were over an hour and we were still trying to go through Orishas and we missed a few, right? So I want to go over now Yemaya, Mafarafun, Ogun. Absolutely, Kish. So now, here's our final Orisha for the moment before I jump into this next level of understanding because now we covered the principal Orishas. Okay, Yemaya. Yemaya is this mystic mother of the ocean. But here I want to give you guys a perspective. When a woman is pregnant and a woman then has a belly, right? She's prego, she got a belly. That's okay. But if you look at the shape of the world and you look at the shape of the belly, you begin to see that both of them are igbas. They're homes, right? For this divinity. And in this case, when a woman is pregnant, right? This is the Ori that selected the destiny that beamed down that's going to fulfill a mission in this marketplace that we live in today called Aye, right? And Yemaya nurtures this process. Now, there's a lot of other Orishas that are in the mix here, but I want you all to just kind of understand that. Why do you think the mother's belly is full of liquid and fluid? And why, when we look at the world, we say, man, the world it has more water than land. And you got to begin to bring these things back together so you can truly understand it just slightly a little bit more. Right? So if Ochun rules the river and the sweet waters, then Yemaya rules the vast, powerful waters of the sea, right? The ocean. Yes, Juju, water is life. Exactly. Right. So we gotta really show a lot of respect and we gotta understand that a lot of the life transitions that we go through, we have to think about Yemaya. Right? Yemoya comes from the Yoruba word Yeye Oma Eya. Okay? Yeye means mother, Omo, right? And Eya is fish, so Omo. So mother whose children are like fish, or mother of the fishes. Right? So this is where Yemoya's name comes from. Now in Lukumi, we say Yemaya, right? We put an A in there instead of the O, but nonetheless, you guys get it, right? You guys get it. So then we begin to kind of see that alluding to this bountiful, right? Um, fertile, right, aspect of the water. If you guys begin to kind of see how do fishes, how do they procreate, right? They make school of fishes. They don't make one, they make hundreds, right, in one shot. Mothers whose children are like fish, right? What a beautiful understanding of her. But not only her, but her domain, the ocean, right? We also see that, Yemaya a lot of times is depicted as a mermaid, a beautiful woman, dressed in blue and white, sometimes pregnant, sometimes carrying a fan, a mirror, right? And so Yemaya is revered as a mother of the Orishas in a lot of different perspectives, right? There's a Pataki where we begin to kind of see where she's the mother of Chango, making her in essence the grandmother of all who call Chango father, Think about it like this, right? So then when we begin to kind of say that we call Chango a Cabo, right? The king, right, of Ocha, we have to understand that we got to respect Yamaya in the same perspective. She is countless, right? In other aspects of other lives and attributes and characteristics of other Orishas that live, in our lives. She complements those things, right? Olokun in some stories is a separate deity, a separate Irumole, depending on how you see Olokun and what version of Olokun. Is it Irumole? Is it Irumole Orum? Right? We begin to kind of see that, you know, there's a lot of aspects and relationships that Yemaya has, specifically with Olokun. Oya is another context, when we begin to kind of see how the relationships between Oya and Yemaya come together, right? There's a lot of relationships, right? When we talk about the sisters, Ochun, Yemaya, and Oya, there's Patakis on when Oya was truly the owner of the waters, right? And there's a lot of patakis that say that it shifted and there was some trickery involved there. But then you talk about when the three sisters were together, right? And it was Ochun who sacrificed herself for Oya, but it was Yemaya that stood tall and tried to direct traffic and tried to better navigate, right? The sanctity and preserve the purity of the Orishas and the females. Yemaya is pretty much very much representative as the femininity and the aspects of femininity where we have to honor her because her cosmic assignment at the end of the day is to watch over the water that sustains life, no different than what Juju just said earlier, right? And so we got to look at Yemaya in many different angles. So if her job is to sustain life by way of water and oversee the cycle of birth, growth, death, rebirth, think about all of this. Yemaya is a lot deeper than we think. When your body begins to decompose, the inside turns to liquid. Your organs turn to liquid, right? Not to try to go, and get a little morbid here, right? When you're born, you're in liquid. It takes 9 months, the number of the egun, for you to be born. This is a reason why we have to understand that Yemaya is a lot deeper than what we understand. Yemaya, after Olodumare created Yemaya, Yemaya was one of the primordial divinities that was born of the Irumoles. And she was tied to a lot of things that have to do with the Ogun River in Nigeria. And again, we talked about the slave trade in many different sessions now, right? But more particularly, for those of you that are on TikTok, we talked about it on YouTube. YouTube, I got a massive videos all over the place for years now, a lot of content. But more importantly, we begin to see that the Great River originated from these other places, right? And there was a myth that happened in Nigeria that talked a lot about where Yemaya was once married to Orisha Oku, right? And for those of us who don't know about Orisha Oku, we understand that Orisha Oku has to do with agriculture. Orisha Oku has a darker side. When we talk about when we bury bodies, we put them in holes, and who makes the hole? Orisha Oku and Iliagere, being the earth, and Aye being the earth. And so the mysteries of Orisha Oku are great, but for all intents and purposes, well, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the agricultural side of nurturing and feeding the earth through land, where Yemaya nurtures and feeds the people through water. Right? What a very beautiful relationship. Orisha Oku and Yemaya married, right? And Yemaya was a very strong woman, right? A successful trader, right? She had extremely, at this point, very nourishing capacities, right, for the world. And when Orisha Oku, insulted her, because she was so much better at diplomacy, so much better at nurturing, right? She was hurt and ashamed. So she fled, right? And she dissolved into the waters of the world, and literally became, the rivers that ran into the ocean, right? So this pataki, the reason why I bring this up for you is because this pataki continues to show that she flowed all the way into the ocean, right? She went to live with Oloku, right? And taking the name Somugaga, right, in that form. So we have to begin to understand the stories and the relationships Yemayas have with many different orishas. So I say this to say that, I'm not here to give you the basic information of, Yemaya is blue and white and representative, and she looks like the Starbucks, logo. And, I'm not here to give you that. I'm here to give you a deeper understanding of the orishas, right? If you want, just the basics, you can get that from just about anybody online. But I want you guys to have this deeper understanding on this beautiful Sunday as we go into this new year, understanding these basic, the foundational, the principal orishas that we worship every day. And that's the big key. Yeah, Juju. Yeah, I said it. Yeah, hey, that's look at the Starbucks logo. But yeah, all right, beautiful. How life, emanates Ifa in a way or the other. One of my favorite aspects of it. Now, Alex, of course, Iburu boy, Buchache. Thank you for those kind words. So then let's go in deeper. Let's go in deeper. So then when we talk about, Yemaya, was diminished by her husband. At that point, it was Orisha Oku, and based on lack of appreciation, right? But in leaving, she expanded to become a queen, of the sea. Likewise, I challenge each and every one of you. Like Yemaya, a painful experience doesn't necessarily mean that everything comes crashing down. Yes, people go through things and hardships, right? Whether it be through relationship issues, through work issues, through maybe financial issues. But nonetheless, painful experiences in our lives can lead us to a broader destiny, right? And it flows with divine purpose. I was having a great conversation with Maile the last couple of days. We started to talk about Ori, to talk about destiny. We started talking about the Ajogun and who the Ajogun is and what's the purpose of the Ajogun. Ay, Boroboya. Because that's what's needed. That's where we're at. That's why we have to talk about these things because we have to understand in order to lead a broader destiny, we have to flow with a divine purpose. And that divine purpose is going to fit its way into our lives one way, shape, or form. And either we can play ball with it or it's going to find us and it's going to do what it needs to do. And a lot of times we're not probably ready for those results. And then we reflect. So, Yemaya, Yemaya, man, Yemaya, there's so much about Yemaya. Motherhood, caretaking. Yemaya cares fiercely for her children. The children of Yemaya should be honored to be children of Yemaya. Yemaya will never abandon you. And like Chango and a lot of different images, right, we talk about the Abis, right? The Abis or the twins, right? The Amawa. The Amawas are very much known to have lived, been born from Ochun, lived with Oya, turned over to Yemaya, right? And we understand the relationships there, right? And the ocean is the womb of the earth. Life began in the sea. So Yemaya is considered a universal mother. That's the reason why a lot of times people get confused with the story of the twins because they try to understand, well, where were they born from? Were they born from Yemaya? Were they born from Oya? Were they born from Ochun? And the reality is, as a universal mother, right? Not just Yemaya, you know what I mean? But you start to kind of see the relationship between Ochun, Oya, and Yemaya. Yes, Yemaya is considered the Yeye. I get that. And she is considered the universal mother, but the relationships between all things that are born resides with Yemaya. So hopefully that kind of debunks a lot of the rumors. Like who do the Imawas belong to? They belong to Ochun, right? But based on a lot of controversy in the Pataki, where Chango was like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you got twins? If you have twins, that means you slept with two guys and now you have two babies. Because twins weren't a thing when Ochun first gave birth to the bees, right? And then they hit them with Oya, and then with Yemaya, being the universal mother, took them in. And to ensure that the family aspect and the nurturing happened, Yemaya was the one who set everything straight. Right? So if you think about it in that perspective, then you begin to understand that Yemaya has a massive role. Yemaya sat down on Chung and Chango like a mediator, like a counselor, and said, "What the hell is wrong with you guys?" Olofin got involved and said, "Listen, twins doesn't mean that she slept with two guys. What are you doing? Open up your eyes." So Yemaya is pretty much very much important when we talk about the aspects of the universal mother. A lot of times people who are initiated into Yemaya find she manifests in both a very gentle, a very comforting aspect, very formidable. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that Yemaya also has a warrior path. A lot of people sleep on Yemaya thinking, she's just a nurturing mother, just the ocean. I don't know about you, but have you ever seen an ocean when it starts to rupture? Right? When the tectonic plates underneath the earth hit and tsunamis start, or a hurricane through the relationships of Yemaya and the sister Oya, right? And then you start to kind of see the aspects of Chango jumping in there, and you see a ferocious side of the ocean that you got to always be careful about, right? So she could be a calm sea that rocks you gently if you're on that cruise boat having a good time and you're like, "Ma, this is nice." Or she could be that tempest, right? And you're gonna have to fight for her, and fight with her, right? Just to get from point A to point D because those ocean floors can get rough, right? So many women at the end of the day, especially within the Afro Caribbean, the Lukumi side of the house, right? We identify with Yemaya as when children often, against great are going against the greater odds, when our children are getting into trouble, when our children, we always kind of look towards Yemaya for guidance to seek, right? Whenever we're having problems conceiving or carrying a pregnancy, we always look to Ochun, right? In tandem, Yemaya and Ochun for help, right? One traditional practice that I know that I talked to a couple of people in many different places, and is that we give and many times within the spiritualism of the Lokumi side, there's always going to be a doll involved whenever you do a misa. A lot of times you see that the children of Yemaya have a strong spirituality, and they always got to have a doll mounted by the Espiritismo side of the house, right? Maybe by the godmother, but a lot of times you start to kind of see where there's a lot of relationships or relations, right, between all children of Yemaya, right? And those things are beautiful things, right? And but it gives you an idea that even like a little girl who has your doll, right? Even grown children of Yemaya need to have that doll. And that relationship always stays there because the nurturing aspect, the nurturing of just a spirit or the nurturing aspect of people or your spirituality in general, that's all Yemaya, right? So just food for thought, you know what I mean? As you start to wonder, like, why is this like this, right? So Yemaya's motherhood isn't just physical. She also gives you the emotional sustenance, right? And healing. Her waters, they even though they're often described as salty, or you go in the ocean, yeah, obviously it's salty, right? But guess what? It's just like your tears. Have you ever thought about that? The ocean water and your tears both have the same sodium level, but it washes away the negative energy. Now you understand why psychiatrists and a lot of therapists, they say, well, if you gotta cry, you gotta cry, you gotta grieve, you gotta let it out. Because it purifies you, it cleans you. And then I take you to a misa, or if I says, go into the ocean and clean yourself with the ocean water, you say, well, damn, that's a hell of a coincidence, huh? Nah. So we got to look at that there's a lot of relationships. The Orishas live within us and everything about us. Right? So the presence of Yemaya, is mind-boggling. Right? Yemaya has been a long time protector of people from disasters, always ensuring that lives are not cut short. Right? And so a lot of times we always look for Yemaya to always grant long life, the life and life free of tragedy to people. That's kind of her basis. She wants to protect the blessings, but don't get in her bad side. Because Yemaya is very deeply connected to life transitions. And when I say life transitions, I want you to consider this. Consider water, right? It changes states. Think about it, right? Life transitions. That means that things begin, things end, life, death, but also think about it like this. Water also changes into liquid, into vapor, into ice. It takes different forms scientifically, does it not? And it connects the stages of life, right? If you were born from water in the womb, think about it. Yemaya guides her children through birth, through purity, through marriage, through parenthood, and even death. Yes, even death. And we begin to kind of see the greatness that is Yemaya. And we return back to the spiritual ocean of Yemaya and Olokun to be cleansed, to be reborn. Yemaya erases fears, right, of death and always reminding us, to always return to the cosmic, umbilical cord, which is Olorum, where God and where we came from. And so I always tell people, hey, never forget who Yemaya is, because she's part of that transition in life. Another aspect I think of Yemaya that's also important for us to always remember is that she deals a lot with the unknown depths of things. This is her relationship really close to Olokun. Because Olokun, we understand there's the depths of secrets and the depths of the ocean where no man will ever understand. Right? And those depths and secrets that Olokun holds in the bottom of the ocean are more metaphysical, right, than anything else. A lot of times we hold within ourselves our deep emotional wounds that are so deep, right, that we don't even know how to recover from it. You see people that are actually technically always, suffering from PTSD or some type of, malfunction spiritually and mentally, and you begin to try to see how does this flow, right? So when you start to kind of, see these aspects of things, you got to understand the Maya plays a massive role. If you're struggling with understanding yourself, or you're grappling with trauma buried from your past, Maya can help you surface those issues in a way so you can heal. She might come in your dreams. She might, drive you to a therapy or a spiritual consultation or, to a Babaláwo for a consultation and bring clarity, from the depths of maybe some emotional trauma or maybe some generational trauma. Right? So, we love Yemaya for that. What Yemaya cannot resolve on the land, she will resolve in the sea. That's something that our elders always used to say. So we have to remember that. In terms of real world, I want to kind of link this up a little bit. Mari, yeah, Yemaya, my mother, my farafun Yemaya, of course, of course. So let's think about this in real world terms. Right? I want to link Yemaya to a couple of things so that we can better understand. Let's link Yemaya to real world, right? And this is not to start debates or nothing, but I want to think about it like this. Yemaya, you know, to things like healing, gender identity, social inclusion, right? Yemaya's very being, Yemaya's very being challenges a lot of the narrow notions of identity. And she's also often depicted in a lot of ways. This is why I say real world issues, she's depicted in a lot of different ways. Sometimes, no different than Olokun, because this is where we start to kind of see the merger of Olokun and Yemaya. And we start to kind of see that Yemaya and Olokun, they serve a very androgynous nature, right? Where we try to decipher male, female, and a lot of different perspectives, right? Within Lokumi, we understand that she is female, right? Like Yemaya Okute, who dresses in a lot of male war attire, right? We begin to kind of say, okay, so what's going on? But wait a minute. These are some of the same issues that we have going on in society, right? Yemaya also, we begin to see that in Lokumi, where Yemaya is the protector and the patron Orisha of homosexuality, right? And we understand that we start to see the clashes of those social inclusions, we'll call it, even back in history, right? A lot of what, Lokumi is describes and what Ifa describes in the storybooks and whatnot is things that we're going through now. We're thinking like, oh my God, this is new. And oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on. No, these things have been going on for a while. And I merely bring this up not to, start a political debate of one side or the other, right? But I'm merely just trying to tell you that society always goes through these processes. And even though we think it's so important today in society, Maya says and reminds us that the divine is not limited to human gender, right? The divinities are not limited to binaries. We have to stop looking at it. And Yemaya in Olokun, particularly Olokun, I'm going to go with, remind us because of the strong relationship between Olokun and Yemaya that we have to stop. And today, go into 2026, don't look at Orishas, masculine and feminine. God is too great to create something that is very much stovepipe. Now, does one have more masculine energy than the other? Sure. Does one have more feminine energy than the other? Sure. But who cares? At the end of the day, we're trying to understand the characteristics and the attributes and how they apply themselves into our lives so that we can push forward better. Now, yes, me personally, you'll hear me say pronouns. I call Chango he, I call Gung he, I call Chung she, that's fine. You know what I mean? But understanding the deeper philosophical side of the Orishas. Now that's something that we have to learn to get a little bit more, in tune with, right? And again, I don't have one side or the other. I can care less about all these other things that are going on in society because this is not the venue for us to discuss those things and my personal feelings. Right? But yeah, Maya, is always gonna be a fierce, protector of her children. And at the end of the day, she's universal and she protects us all. Okay. But remember, yeah, Maya also inspires acceptance of oneself and others in their uniqueness. So I would also, caution people, be very careful. When it comes to Yemaya, Yemaya likes you the way you were born. Yemaya likes you the way you grow up into that form. You know what I mean? It's no different than a fish. When a school of fish are born, right, and you go from little fish, little guppies, right, into something big, right? You're not changing it, and you're not trying to be a salmon. It's not trying to be a clownfish, right? Everybody serves a purpose. So we got to be very careful with those things. And so Yamaya just wants to remind us and inspire us to accept oneself and others in their uniqueness. So then we also have to understand that, although maybe some people are somewhat different, we have to be careful on how we discriminate. Yamaya, Yamaya, when it comes to family unity, is big. I told many people, and on this particular, Sunday, special, we'll call this, spiritual Sunday is what I call it. But um, I find myself always talking about the Orishas to people and telling people, hey, listen, the Orishas, believe it or not, if you look at it at a certain perspective, they pretty much correlate to every aspect of your life, right? And when we talk about Yemaya, I always tell people, listen, Yemaya is all about that family unity, that nurturing. We always got to go to Yemaya for the nurturing, right? And the well-being of children and the progression of community, right? And this is where if there's a broken home or if there's conflict between family members, Yemaya's guidance is always crucial. I would tell each and every one of you that for those of you who are children of Yemaya or have a lot of relations with Yemaya, your heart goes out to that unity, that inclusion of family and friends that means something to you, Maybe not others, but it does. And that's important. So that's why for those of you who know people that are children of Yemaya, you got to be very considerate to that aspect. And you got to have that emotional intelligence that when you approach a child of Yemaya, or you even approach Yemaya at all, there's certain emotional triggers that they have that you always got to be cautious of. You always got to remember. Yemaya's guidance is crucial because, she reminds us, at least parents, right, to be there for their kids, right? The way she was famously, she stays on the shore watching over all her children, right, in the ocean, and as she stands in the shore, she turns around and the children on the land. So that she reminds children to honor their mothers and their grandmothers. If you're a child of Yemaya, your family unity and that unit needs to be tight. And if you ever want to sever that, you have to have some good rationale because it goes in conflict with the very essence of what Yemaya calls for. If you don't have a good relationship with your godparents, Yemaya is not going to be very keen to that unless there was something there that caused the affliction. The Yemaya will take care of you instead of, you know, that essence not necessarily aligning with you. And so just food for thought when we talk about Yemaya. A lot of times, one cannot talk about Yemaya without mentioning the ritual cleansings, the rogación de cabeza, the ebori. Ebori le da cool water, right? And sometimes we got to add some seawater, or sometimes we take this from the sopera. For those of you who have Yemaya crown, or maybe you have Yemaya consecrated, right? Lavao, you take some of that bath water and you cleanse yourself with it, and you see what happens to you. Right, those are beautiful things. That's how we relieve stress, the psychic disturbance a lot of times in our lives. Yemaya's water cleanses, spiritual impurities, and we accumulate, that a lot of times just living life with work and family, we accumulate a lot of anger, envy, grief, right? And there's nothing like an inner bath to clean us. Right, so just food for thought. Food for thought. A lot of times, a lot of simple Yemaya baths that we like to take is you take some flowers, some blue flowers specifically, put them in some water, put some, Florida water in there, throw some cascarilla in there, take some ocean shells, mix it in there to get her essence, right? And take yourself a nice bath if you're a child of Yemaya. This is not a substitute to an omiero, right? In a way, in a way of sign bath, a messy, right? But it's something nice. It's something that cleanses you nonetheless, right? But it's a nice, good complement to that. So we spoke about now we took 2 Sundays to talk about the Odishas. And I want to make sure that I hit this home. We journeyed, right, through a few of the major ones. We didn't journey through all of them, right? But this is just to complement all the spiritual Sundays so that we can better understand it, right? But already you can see, right, a paranormal, or better yet, you can see a panorama, right, of human experiences, right? You guys ever took your phones out, you put it in panorama mode, and you're able to walk around and you're able to get a full picture? And in one picture, you just saw a 360 view, right? If you haven't never done it, do it. I promise you, you'll love the experience, right? But you begin to see that in your very life, you have this panorama, right? And you have Obatala bringing you the wisdom and the purity, the courage and the justice being provided by Chango, the love and creativity given to you by Ochun, the hard work and the perseverance given you to by Ogun. You see the nurturing and the healing of Yemaya. And then we begin to wonder, imagine if you had the essence of these just common core orishas, right? And we understand they live within us, but we just need to align with them. Imagine how much better you are if I told you you got wisdom and purity, courage and justice. You're going to always be loved and always have creativity. Hard work and perseverance will live within you. and you'll be nurtured and you'll always be healed. How beautiful does that sound? The Orishas are not distant. They're not abstract gods, right? And I'm not calling out other religions, but that they're not abstract. It's not just, hey, listen, pray, say a couple of prayers, and then repent, and you're going to be good. No, you're getting the roadmap and the blueprint. You have the roadmap and the blueprint. It blows my mind that people don't take advantage of this. It really, really just kind of drives me bonkers sometimes. But I say this to say, you know, on this beautiful Sunday, the Orishas are not distant. They're with us. They're present in our lives. They're in our personalities. They're in our struggles and our triumphs, right? And in Ifa, we understand that human beings are the children of Orisha. This is the reason why when you get your hand of Ifa, you learn who's your guardian Orisha and you become a Omo, whatever that Orisha is. Like me, I'm Omo Chango. I'm a son of Chango. Yes, I'm a Babaláwo. Sure, I'm a disciple of Orumila, but I'm a son of Chango. Right? The Orishas live within us, each of us, by our birth date or initiation. One has a guardian Orisha who claims us, and we have to use them. So now I want to talk about that a little bit. You know what I mean? If we call ourselves a Mogun, Mo Chun, or Mo whoever, right? All Orishas can teach and guide you, nonetheless. So I don't want you to be limited to that. But I really want you to understand something. You came down to this world with a guardian Orisha. You were a child of a certain Orisha that was going to mediate and protect your Ori who chose the destiny in order to push you forward. You have to understand these things through ceremonies, hand of Ifa particularly, and the only thing. Don't let anybody fool you. Don't let anybody kind of veer you off. If you already, let's say, crown, let's say you already went through processes in Ocha, or let's say you already went through certain other processes, but you skipped a step because you didn't go to Ifa first. That's okay. Don't beat yourself up. But I would tell you, maybe it's time to go backward a little bit. Let me see and let me understand why my guardian Orisha is protecting this Ori that has the destiny that I'm supposed to work. Because it doesn't matter how many consecrations you have or initiations. If you don't understand the relationships between destiny, Ori that holds it, and the guardian Orisha that's protecting that, you have nothing. You have nothing. Yes, you have some great advice and maybe some other itas and maybe you're maneuvering, but you'll never reach the true purpose on why you came here. That's Ori, Ayamo, right? When they went to the house of Ayala to pick up the destiny, there was a process that happened at your birth, before your birth, right? And that's something that we always got to remember, right? So even beyond our specific orishas, remember that we're all made from the stardust. Human bodies were given the divine breath of God and me, right? So think about it. We are made of the Orisha energy too, no different, right, than the Orishas themselves. Since the 401 human souls, right, that attained Orisha status at one point in time and deified, right, because we studied this already. We talked about this in many different forms. Olodumare created the Irumules. Those primordial energies then became Irumule Orums. Those Irumule Orums and that energy began to flow into something that was created through Aye, the world that we live in today, and, and actually made Orishas. Through those Orishas, we understand that there is deified Orishas. That means that these were human beings that deified into Orishas. That collective pool of spiritual consciousness is within each and every one of you, each and every one of us. So no. I have a question. Is there a book with the patakis? Oh, Arg. Great question. There is books on patakis, right? Patakis are written in two different forms. I'll say three different forms for the sake of just making sure holistically you understand something. So Ifa has a bunch of patakis in Lukumi, and then you got a whole bunch of patakis within Isheshe, and then you got a whole bunch of patakis for Olorishas, and then you have a whole bunch of patakis in Ocha based on the Merin de Legum. So there's a lot of different patakis out there. Here's something I would tell you, and I don't know how in depth you are inside of the faith, but it's gonna be the message of the pataki that I want you to focus on. And I want you to get deeper into that message. That way you read the pataki over and over and over again. You focus on the characters and what's going on and what's the scenery and what's the message, right? Because that's what truly means something and matters. People get hung up on a lot of times the characters and this person walked from here, it said hi to this person here, so therefore those two people have to be friends. And that's it. They don't think about anything else. You know what I mean? That's just an example. But I just challenge you, look, make sure you look deep into these patakis. I also heard a pataki where Orumila was hiding when Olodumare made the world. That pataki that you're referring to is why we call Orumila the Eleri, it being the witness to creation. And Olodumare knew that Orumila, being present in the room, Orumila would look, right? And it wasn't that he was hiding in the room, but he was peeking at creation. And Olodumare at that very moment said, Orumila, based on your wisdom, you understand you needed to see how creation was made in order for you to be effective because you are the Orisha, the Irumole of wisdom. I knew you were going to peak. And he said, in every creation, there has to be a witness. And at that very moment, Olodumare said, you are my Elerepin. You will be the witness to my creation. That's how that storyline went, if that makes sense. All right. No, no. Beautiful. Beautiful. No, no. This is good. This is good. All right. So I pose a challenge of reflection for each and every one of you, right? Which Orisha principles are most alive with you? Let me answer me. Not because you got told in a hand of Ifa ceremony, oh, my guardian Orisha is Chango, Yamaya, Ochum, Ochosi. No, 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 no. Which one lives inside of you right now? Which one do you feel is navigating your life right this second? And is it the same Orisha that you were told in your hand of Ifa ceremony is your Orisha? Think about it. Think about it. That right there is the key because I want to see you guys put your comments in. I want to see it. I want to see it. Come on, give it to me. I'm hungry to see what people say. So that means that I'm living a life of Ochung right now, but I'm a son of Chango. Just like that. Think about it. I tell you all the time. Well, I love Ochung. I'm all sweet with Ochung, but I'm a son of Chango. Let me hear what you guys got to say. Which one resonates deeply with you? You know what I mean? Perhaps, with one that you aspire to be because you love the characteristics. Think about it like that. And then when you start to kind of dig even further, right? Who's your favorite Orisha? Jose, how you doing, little boy? Good to see you on here, my friend. But as you begin to kind of examine this is the reason why I say it. And you guys could put everything in there. Siempre Yemaya. Yemaya, little boy. The big thing here, I was told, oh yeah, and I still feel it is, oh yeah. Little boy, you got, hey, oh yeah's kids are, forget it. But here's something that I want to kind of make sure that, you and I are all on the same page here. You know, it's all about self-examination. It's all about looking within yourself. It's all about, where are you going with this feeling? Maybe you always been, fiercely protective of truth and fairness. Maybe that suggests, Chango's flame lives inside you or burns with you. Or perhaps you're a natural caregiver, right? Maybe your empathy because of your Maya's maternal waters might be strong in you. Right? Think about it like that. But here's what I also challenge you to do. Look around your community, your work, your family, and you can probably find a very similar outlook. And you start to take a step back and you say, damn, I bet you that person right there has a lot of characteristics of this Orisha. And you start to kind of see some of the correlations. But then you also learn how to better maneuver the conversations with them or how to act with them and that is building your emotional intelligence. This is the same thing that psychiatrists teach and life coaches teach. The emotional intelligence is what matters in order for you to interact with people. But the Orishas have been telling us this, and Ifas have been telling us for decades, right? Millenniums. Just think about it, right? So, maybe you're the peacekeeper in your family, the one who stays calm and offers wisdom. Maybe it's because you channel Obatala. Maybe you're an artist, a lover of music and dance. Someone who likes to sweeten up the room or likes to be the center of attention and have conversations, right? Clearly, Ochung's maybe sweetness flows through you. Recognizing these aspects are important because it kind of shows you, your power, where it lies, where your growth areas might need to be, what I mean? And focusing on strengths and weaknesses is part of life. So, and I mention this because at the bottom of it all, we have to pinpoint those qualities to cultivate a balanced character in our lives. Is the reason why in Ifa we talk so much about Iwapale, Iwapale, Iwapale. The Orishas serve as a guide in very specific real world contexts. If you think about it, if you're facing a court case or you need to speak truth to power, you invoke Chango for integrity and confidence. Starting a new business or creative project, you invoke Ochung for inspiration and attractiveness, and then Ogun for perseverance. And then you're pregnant or you're hoping to be, so then you start to invoke Yamaya and Ochung for some maternal blessings. You're struggling with some moral decisions, so Batala's cool reasoning can guide you and ask, for his white cloth to cover your mind so you can see clearly. This is how you maneuver the orishas. It's not just about brujeria. It's not about, no. Reinforce yourself. Understand yourself. And that's the point of this spiritual Sunday. So I know we've been out here for a little while now. I think I've been out here for a while. Yeah, I'm in love with Yamaya. I crown Obadala. Buruboya. That's beautiful. Mine are good. Right now is Obadala, cool head, peace, tranquility, even though I'm a more lewa. Oh, Buruboya. That's exactly right. My very first reading was Odudua. My mother Ochanla. Never changed. Eshu's my favorite. IK, when you say your very first reading, you're talking about that you got your Orisha pulled. And when you say that your mother's Ochanla, I'm assuming you're already crowned. Um, but nonetheless, all good, all good. But I merely ask these questions because the terminology sometimes get slighted a little bit, and we don't know where that's going. We're always here to assist, and this is why we come together so that we can learn together, and that's the idea. So, in conclusion, so that we can move forward and end this live, here's where I want to do. Obviously, next Sunday, right? It's gonna be a very interesting Sunday. I'm looking forward to it. I am going to be coming back on and we're gonna go through things. But I want to conclude with this. Remember that learning the Orishas is not just an intellectual exercise, it's an exploration, right? An exotic, spiritual, metaphysical exploration of life. It is a mirror, it's a map, a mirror that shows you aspects of yourself, right? And these divine personalities, mapping, the aspects and becoming a higher version of yourself. The Orishas have shown us the blueprint and the spiritual evolution and everything that we do. and contributed to the balance of the world. So likewise, each of us is called to overcome personal challenges, cultivate our unique gifts, and contribute something more meaningful to our community by way of the same attributes and characteristics that the Orishas have instilled in us. So I call on you now, on this Sunday, as you step into the gatherings coming into this week, right? You got good old Christmas, right? And you take, a concrete action. I want you to be inspired by Orishas. And not just now, but every time you come together in unity. Maybe this means finally tackling that injustice that's in your neighborhood. Maybe it's that, Yemaya is bringing that nurturing aspect into your home. Maybe it's, channeling your inner Ogun, diligence and updating your resume and fixing the things in your house that need to be fixed and that are broken and recommitting yourself to a healthy routine and for your body and going to the gym and looking for Ochun's joy in life and inviting the gatherings and the dancing. Think about each and every one of these situations because the Orishas live within you. Those who want to align closer, they know what they need to do. They get their words, their hand to defy. They want to go get crowned a Buru Boya. Right? People want to get closer to that energy. I get that. But understanding them today is way more important than just jumping on in because it doesn't get any easier. Right? So just because you jumped right in. So I invite the Orishas into our lives through prayers, thoughts, our actions, and to open the doors. Hey, so with that said, hey, I think it's gonna be important for us, and I'll say goodbye. We've been on here for a little bit now. It's been like about an hour and 18 minutes, and I always do this. I always go over time. I always say 1 hour. But hey, guys, hey, Buru Boy Abucheche, it was a pleasure having you guys on here today. And thank you for tuning in. Not sure how this TikTok thing is gonna work. I'm trying to do both, YouTube Live and TikTok at the same time, and I was hoping to get the camera going, but now the camera is off, and who knows? Who knows how this is gonna play out? But we're gonna keep testing it, and we're gonna keep rolling with it. So with that said, hey, Buru Boy Abucheche, thank you each and every one of you guys for tuning in. It's your favorite Babaláwo. At least I hope so. Omodum, Oddi Leke. Coming at you. Yeah, perfect with the exception of the echo. Juju, I'm trying. I'm working on it. We're getting there. We're getting there. All right, guys. Have a great one. Big Ache. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.